we want to have with Lois Okello, who's a counselor and also a psychologist. That is a huge number. Over 800,000 people die worldwide, globally.
Yeah, and that's a fact, Brenda. Basically, I'm even glad that we are here to talk on a national television regarding suicide, which is issue of death. And the fact is that this happens, and it's, in fact, it's not that some cases, most cases go unreported. And the fact that now a few are being reported and it's coming to that number, we know that it's much higher.
So the number would be, can be higher than 800,000?
If every case was reported, then the number would be much higher. Yeah.
And it's between the age of 15 to 29. Why this age?
You realize that the age of 15 to 29 is where people are getting their identity, their goals are being set and met, their aspirations are being stabilized, and some are failing. By the age of 29, most people are expected to have settled. You know, that's society expects them to have settled. They have a job, they know what they're supposed to do. And in case of failure at that point in time, then it becomes a big issue. But then the 15, which is the teenage years, has a lot of conflicts, you know, the personal, interpersonal conflict that they go through, because they're forming relationships, they're forming identities, they are trying to get affirmed and no one is affirming them. They are trying perhaps, you know, to complete education. Maybe they have failed because the measures, you know, they've not met the ideal measures. So that becomes a very volatile age. Yeah.
So how can we reduce the number of suicide cases between the age of 15 to 29? Because it looks like there's a bit of some crisis.
For us in the, perhaps, you know, in the world of psychology, the greatest issue that needs to be done is basically the guidance. The guidance for the 15 to say up to 20, 21-year-old. But you find that a lot of time, the 15-year-old, you know, it's interesting how when someone reaches 15, they are not yet adults. They are still young. They are still trying to be adults, but they keep being told you are now old enough. So you're supposed to find your way out. So certain things that they do, because they are struggling to get identity, they get bashed for it rather than being guided for it. And that becomes a big challenge. Because at the age of 14, 15, 16, up to 17, we want somebody to be an adult, and yet they are not. They don't have the resources to make things of their own. They're still struggling in their mind, they're still settling, but no one is really there to sit and help them to understand what you're going through is normal. Yeah, and the mistakes you've made are normal. The challenges you're facing are normal. And we are here to support you as long as, you know, there's time for people to sit around and speak with each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you talk about suicide, and the people who say, oh, the person had suicide tendencies, so what are some of these tendencies? How can someone identify, like, this person has suicide tendencies, and how can we prevent it?
Yeah. The fact that might surprise you and surprise viewers is that each one of us have suicidal thoughts at one point in life.
So even
every person.
So even us, that's
even myself, me. Even yourself.
Okay.
That each and every person has got to a point at one time where they thought, I'm hopeless. It is true.
So how do you identify that?
And then it is this thought that if it is taken a step higher, then it becomes a tendency. Because at one point in time each person has been disappointed at one time in life. And that disappointment becomes a thought that I'm no longer, you know, people don't value me. But then if it goes beyond the thought and you start asking, then how do I just deal with myself? Then it becomes a tendency. Now, you've asked a critical question in the sense that we are now cognizant of the fact that there are now also mental disorders that are make people highly vulnerable to suicide. And these are the disorders that sometimes people say in such a family, you know, people tend to commit suicide. But it's not the tendency to commit suicide, it's an underlying mental condition that is transferred to people because it's genetic, it's inherited. Yeah, so we have all those kind of issues surrounding tendencies. Then also, depending, like now, the rise, again, we realize, is as a result of the barrier has been broken.
Okay.
So many people are taking their lives, so it's becoming a little bit easier and more comfortable, because previously a suicide person was being treated extremely different, both in the cultural society, but even in the religious arenas. The burials were different, the mourning period was different, but now, because people they are not able to report, and they are also mixed. I mean, we are discovering that some people are committing suicide because of reasons not known to them, and because of a medical condition. So now that people are not being treated as stigmatizing as it was before, people are getting comfortable with suicide.
But let's talk about a parent who's watching us right now, you're in KTN News Center. And then probably one morning, you just wake up and you find your son or your daughter hanged herself or himself, and probably didn't know your child had these tendencies. So as a parent, how can you identify that my child has a problem?
In fact, that is the norm. Most of the teenagers, the parents wake up and they find that the child has, particularly if it's hanging. The hanging becomes a very obvious kind of proof that this was suicide. But some of them have taken maybe medication, they overdose. Some have taken a mix of stuff. But the truth of the matter is, it's just that someone either trivialized what was happening in the life of that child or that person, or there were things that were there, but they didn't realize that they needed to be paid attention to.
Okay.
So one of the things that there's nobody, and it's a fact, who wakes up one day and just commits suicide. There's a buildup of issues that must have happened, however trivial they are, and particularly now for the parents or children who are still in the teen years or they're young adults. There are things that they have done, there are things they have said, there are circumstances where they have shown some signs which were not paid attention to. And it could be as subtle as saying, I am tired, I'm fed up of life. As subtle as saying, I should give you people rest. As subtle as that. And then also, maybe there's been conflict for a very long time with this child, with this young adult, and then suddenly they come and they say, I will no longer trouble you, ma'am.
Let me just go.
They're not saying, let me just go. They're just saying, I will no longer trouble you.
Okay.
So I've changed.
Okay. But when you say that what makes people to commit suicide is because of some of the challenges they face, and it keeps on piling and piling, and they don't want to talk about it. But what would you say about some of the international celebrities? Let me just mention like the celebrity chef Anthony Bourdain, and also Kate Spade, who's a fashion icon. These are people, when the world they committed suicide, and you're like, you have all this money, and you just decided to take away your life.
I think you've got it on spot. The suicide, people coming to a point where they think life is no longer useful, has nothing to do with the resources that they have, has nothing even to do with the achievements that they have, has nothing to do with their image, to do with their family background. At that point in time, it has everything to do with their inner feelings, how they feel about themselves, and where they place themselves in the context of living.
Okay.
So someone is committing suicide in the midst of achieving what me and you would consider, the highest point in life. Yeah.
Okay.
So it has a lot to do with the mental condition and the feeling that is going on inside that person.
Okay. But let's get it back home. Today, Kenya joins the rest of the world in celebrating World Suicide Prevention Day, and it's being held in Embu County. Do you think the government has done enough, especially when it comes to the universal health care?
The reason that would make me say that we are perhaps at 30% of taking care of people and preventing suicide is because we have not yet, yes, there's an effort. There's an effort to be able to anchor the psychosocial support and psychological services in most of the government, centers, health centers. And remember, one of the greatest issue is that people have thoughts, they have failures, they have issues that they don't know who to speak to or where to get help.
Okay.
And the argument then comes in, really, if you're to see a psychologist, perhaps a professional like myself, there's a cost to it. And then we are also not very many. So what happens to that person in the rural area? And I'm glad it's being taken to Embu. What happens to that person right somewhere in Lokichogio? Where do they get this kind of services? So then the government is beginning, but they have not yet gone to the level of anchoring. Just like you do testing for any other diseases, there is need also to have assessment and also support for people's psychological.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you're a counseling psychologist. When you talk about people, you know, need to be able to access the services of counseling, are people ready to accept the fact that they have a problem? So I need to see a psychologist.
What has happened in the past, Brenda, there have been, and coming from Kenya Psychological Association, there are quite a number of people who are quacks, let me say, who have presented themselves as professionals. And then because they are not professionals, they've ended up hurting people much more than they are helping them. So then someone begins to wonder, you know, the whole thing is about the fear. Am I going to be helped really? Because people have gone to counselors that were not professionals and they have got hurt. Because if you get to someone and you really trust and you hope for them to help you, then you'll not get helped, then people withdraw. So there's a lot of fear and uncertainty about the counseling profession.
Okay.
But when they get to a professional counselor and they get help, I've seen a number of people actually referring others, and when they get help, that person refers another person, and so there's the referral from people who have got help.
Okay.
You can't tell someone to come and see, or even to go and see any professional if you have not got help.
Okay.
And maybe these people place themselves, you know, at a place, they were not professionals.
So others choose not to go to a psychologist for counseling, and they decide, and I'm sure you've heard of the cases, they decide, I need to air it out on social media, especially Facebook. And we've reported so many cases here, you know, in the media of people just, you know, writing messages to family and friends, I'm going to commit suicide, this is my last day, blah, blah, blah. So you wonder, why would someone decide to pour out their emotions on social media and people don't take them seriously? The next thing you're hearing, so this guy was so serious. Yeah,
they were serious. And remember what we said earlier, because for me, the moment I'm seeing such a person posting something like that on the social media, in the counseling, in the professional counseling, we take it seriously. Whether they were joking or they were not, they were just, it's just, you know, they just woke up, we take it seriously. So until we assess that they were joking or they are not serious, then personally, I would not rest. So even if they said it just as a passing thing, we don't take it.
So why would someone choose not to go to a psychologist for counseling, but choose to say it on social media?
It's a safe environment. It's safer. In fact, right now, the social platform is safer. They find it safe. However, it's a double-edged sword, because you sometimes see the kind of responses that they get from people. It's not usually very, very nice. You can get some who really empathize or sympathize, and others who bash you, and others who, perhaps someone is also, you know, taking it back on you because they're going through trauma themselves. And the other reason is, for sure, accessibility to professional counselors. They are still few. We have 40 million Kenyans. Right now, in the association, we have, and in many other associations, a total of, say, 6,000. And many of them are concentrated in the urban centers and in the institutions of learning where they are training and stuff like that. So the effort to be able to decentralize then makes accessibility also a problem, okay, then still we have not yet embraced the whole concept of talk therapy. I hear people coming, oh, you're just talking. So there's nothing you're giving me. There's nothing you're doing to me. Because the human, I think the African perception is that if someone is to help you, they do for you something. And that's why perhaps the spiritual platform is becoming more, you know, more preferable, because you're made to say, maybe drink something, you're made to be, somebody pour some oil on you, they make you do some somersaults, you know, those kind of things. Or they take you through rituals, because we are used to people doing things on us and for us to help us think, or to make us think that we are going through interventions. However, you know, when you come for psychological help, you're more or less helped to do things to make life better for you. And it's that effort to be able to get to do things for yourself that becomes a big problem.
Let me take this back to stories that we've had this year. Lots of stories where a wife has killed the husband has killed the wife together, the children, then you find the man hanging. Is that part, can you term that as suicide?
Of course, in the correct word, we call it homicide, but it's just suicide en masse, you know, that involves a family, and suicide that it's multiple. So it's still suicide, because they've taken the life of someone, and they also taken their life. So it was a premeditated, most of it. And we find a lot of that has happened. And in the past, in fact, this year, from last year to this year, and many of them are not reported. However, when we have an opportunity, because sometimes we do get an opportunity, and we send our professional counselors to be able to support that family, you know, the remaining members of the family have got to be supported. Now, when they go into when they walk with them, they realize that there were things that were going on, but, you know, people tried to intervene and it didn't work. Like, for example, when many times you ask someone to maybe step out of a toxic relationship, or step out of a relationship that has got to a point where there is violence, and they step out maybe for a day or two and they come back. Or they step out for 1 week or 2 weeks, then they come back. And they are only stepping out, but there's nothing they are doing within this period. The two of them are doing nothing to be able to mend this relationship. So because perhaps they're tired of staying away from each other, they come back. Then the end result will be that you can easily get homicide.
Now let's talk about something that the Ministry of Health is doing. And correctly, the Ministry of Health, as much as, of course, Kenya is celebrating the world, is joining the world in celebrating this day in Embu. And the Ministry of Health says that it should be training health community workers to help them identify mental challenges for every adult who dies by suicide. How effective is that going to be?
Remember, as we talk now, suicide is still stigmatized. It's still a stigma. So getting people even to report it and get data and be able to analyze this data and interrogate that data is still a big challenge. Now, the Ministry of Health, where we have the counseling psychologists and counselors and community counselors, they are housed in the Ministry of Health, but there's still even a struggle with the implementation of the Kenya Counseling and Psychologists Act, which was passed in 2014. So before they really put some of the structures in place, they might not really go far. Because if an implementation of an act, and these are hundreds of thousands of professionals who are within the Ministry of Health, and they have not been placed in places where they can be able to offer support, then a lot of things that have to do with psychological factors might not really go far. Because psychiatrists are very few. Psychiatric nurses are extremely few. So then, but counselors are more, and there are many. So embracing them rather than training would be much better than going for training other persons while they're already trained persons, but it's just that there are no structures that Ministry of Health has really put in place to be able to have them begin to work and work in a structured way.
So, and before we take a short break, just to ask you, so families who have relatives or children or husbands or wives who have these suicide tendencies, do they also go for counseling Because I believe they also need someone to walk with them.
You know, the critical issue in suicide prevention is support. Both family and professional support. That's the critical issue. You cannot have someone who has developed tendencies and they do not receive professional and also family, and the family is also helped on how to support them. They will definitely end up committing suicide. In fact, an attempt is taken extremely very important.
Because there are people who attempt, then they don't die.
Yes.
Then,
yeah. If they are not professionally assisted, they will definitely have another successful attempt.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, counseling psychologist Lois Okello, who has been talking to us about the suicide. And remember that today Kenya is joining the rest of the world in marking this day of suicide, World Suicide Prevention Day, and it's being held in Kiambu County. And just remind you that according to the World Health Organization, it is actually it's in Embu County. It's not Kiambu County, it's in Embu County. And just to mark this important day, and because statistics paint a grim picture of this phenomenon that is actually proving to be a global problem. So time to take a short break. Still keep it KTN News Center, and just to give you some of the suicidal celebrities, as we have Anthony Baden, who was a celebrity chef. We also had a fashion icon, Kate Spade, and also an actor, Robin Williams, and also a musician, that is Tim Baglin, and star Chris Benoit. So these are just some of the suicidal celebrities, stories that have been airing for the better part of this year. So I'd just like to leave you with those pictures of some of the suicidal celebrities that has been covered for the better part of this year, as we take the short commercial break.
This is KTN News.